We are living and working longer than ever before. People in their 50s, 60s, and beyond are redefining what it means to have a career, starting ventures, changing roles, bringing decades of experiences and expertise to the table. And yet, the modern workplace remains deeply systematically ageist. Older workers first face pervasive stereotypes about their ability to adapt, to learn, to keep up with the pace of change. Their experience is simultaneously more valuable and more invisible to the organization they serve. And the very communication tools and norms that define how work gets done today often exclude and alienate them by design. My guest today argues that this is not just a collection of individual biases, it is a system, a machine that is structurally rigged against age and is costing us all some money. Lucy Standing is the founder of Brave Starts, an organization that supports over 50 entrepreneurs and employees navigating work and life transitions. She's the author of the book, The Age Against the Machine, a provocative look at ageism in the modern workplace and what it will take to build a wall of work that genuinely includes and empowers older workers. At a time when we desperately need the wisdom, experience, and perspective that age brings, Lucy invites us to confront the myriad ways our organizations devalue and discard it. Today, we are going to talk about the invisibility paradox at the heart of how companies see age, the generational divides in how work gets done, and what it will take to catch up to the reality of an aging workforce, not just in policy, but in reality, in practice. Lucy, welcome to the Growth Hacking Culture podcast. It's lovely to have you with me today.
Well, that was such an amazing introduction, Ivan. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here.
Lucy, tell me one thing. Where, how, how did you decide to write that book? Was it because you are coming to the 50s? Because you observed the 50s? How did it, from where did it come from?
It started because I run a nonprofit community. So
Mhm.
you mentioned in your introduction, and as part of educating people around the options that they have, you imagine so many of our members, a lot of brilliant people, could be surgeons, doctors, lawyers, police, you name it. A lot of people think, oh, maybe I've got a story to tell, maybe I've got a book in me. So I invited a publisher to come and talk to our members about whether or not they might want to consider writing a book, fact, fiction, all those sorts of things. It's just purely informative. And he met loads of our members that night. He thought, this is a really interesting crowd. Anyway, about 18 months later, he got in touch with me and he said, that community you've got, this whole midlife, this whole career, the thing that people are, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I thought, no, it's not a bad idea actually. So that's where it came from. But the inspiration, the material, the evidence, a lot of it was already there. So, this is our sort of bread and butter. It's what we study, it's what we understand. There's lots of case studies in the book. There's lots of research that we do. We're not a coaching based organization. We're an organization that equips people with practical insights, practical activities, lots of actions. And yeah, it was actually good to get it out on paper.
I was already cracking a joke about the title of your book,
Mm.
The Age Against the Machine, because it made me think about one of my favorite bands back in the 90s. And it looks a little bit like a provocation where, in fact, you are putting the biases against older people, not on the individual, but on the system. So, what made you take that call? Because it is a powerful statement that you are doing here.
Yeah,
Why the system?
because there's so many things to tackle at once. If we think about, well, what is the machine? Well, the machine is government systems. Why is it we retire at 65? Where does that come from? It's societal expectation. So why is it we work 5 days a week until we're 65, and then what? We're just at leisure for the rest of our lives? Why do we leave all of the leisure, the best time of our life, to the point in our life where we're most likely to be physically disabled and more likely to die? I mean, that's just nuts. Why not spread it out? If you were starting from a blank slate, would you design life and work like that? That doesn't seem like, so you've got societal expectations, you've got government systems, how much, yeah, all of those sorts of things. You've also got, I guess, organizations themselves. So linear careers, entry points that assume that your trajectory is upwards. They don't kind of go, oh, we're going to assume that when you join, you're actually going to want to go down, as some people do. They're not designed like that. There aren't entry points for people. Oh, now that you're 60, let's recruit you. We want to train you up to come and join our organization. So you don't see that, and then you've got our own brains. There's lots of people, even though you've got societal expectations, you've got mismanaged organizations, you've got poor government policy. Despite all of that, I'd still say that the biggest barrier that most people have is their own brain, because a lot of people honestly can be kind of lazy at this stage in life. Sometimes there's an element of entitlement. I'm really senior, I've got all of this, I've got all this wonderful experience. Well, that's a mindset that's a problematic mindset. There's another mindset, which is, well, I am a bit too old and overqualified now, and I'm a bit beyond it. That's for younger person. That's not for me anymore. So again, it's slightly apologetic mindset. And then there's the others that are just so beaten down, as you were describing, with ageist attitudes, that they're just now in a learned helpless position, where they're not actually fighting anymore. So the machine is multifaceted, and I don't think you can look at just one aspect without acknowledging the other sides.
I'm totally with you. So what I have observed in Europe is that many of the people who are 50 plus, and especially the ones who have left the corporate world, and they have been fired, sometimes because they're old. And by the way, I wanted to open this parenthesis because this is my moment of revenge. Back in the days in my corporate life, my boss nudged me to fire someone because he looked old. The guy was making his job in a great way. He was very empathetic. He wanted to transmit his knowledge to many, many people. And just because he looked old, after 3 days of taking over that position, my boss told me, check if we cannot reposition this guy because he looks old. I was in a marketing department. It wasn't fashionable to show somebody with a certain age and with gray hair.
Well,
That
there you go.
hurt.
Yeah, but I mean, and you hear these sorts of stories all the time, whether it's the recruiters that say you've got this straight overt ageism like that. That's a perfect example. We don't want this guy. It doesn't look good. Gray hair, looks too old. But then you've got maybe the benevolent form, which is these guys have made more money, they've had more time, they've probably paid off their mortgage. This job is deserved to go to, someone who's younger, who needs that job more than the older person. So, there are people that do it, this kind of ageism, or has the impact of being ageist, but they're doing it from what they perceive to be a good place.
And you have put the finger in something important, the need. Who has a need, in fact? When you are older, maybe you don't need this financial, you have less of that financial pressure. So you can take decisions not only based on the financials, because kids are already working maybe or finishing university, but
Yeah.
the need for having a meaningful life, it's just come at the age of 45, comes back. This dream that you had when you were a teen to change the world and whatsoever comes back, and you want to maybe not change the world because you have become wiser, but you want to have impact on others. And that becomes so important that at the end it can introduce certain things in your head that makes you not feel belonging anymore to the corporations where you are. So the question is, they don't need the money, or we don't need the money. It's more the society that would need to have a little bit more of wisdom, perspective, that sometimes the youth may not have, or the necessity to transmit something, a knowledge, a skill, and a know-how that is difficult. Skills, knowledge, that is easily transmittable. But the know-how, how you think about the process of thinking, is something that at the age of 50, you have enough perspective to understand it and pass it on to someone so that things can be greater than just done by one generation.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And I think in an age of increasing tools in the AI space, actually the real danger for younger people now is that all of those sorts of jobs that used to be done by younger people are now being done by AI. And because it's being done by AI, in a way that allows, for the jobs that are developing and evolving, if less time is needed on the analysis or less time is needed on the copywriting, then you have more time that's needed on the judgment. What do we include in this article in the first place? Who should it go to? When do we send it? How do we make sure someone's read it? If someone's unhappy with it, how do we deal with that scenario? And all of those sorts of skills, whether you read Nesta reports, whether it's Pearson, whether it's the Oxford Martin School of all the kind of the future skills, a lot of what the kind of the rise of AI is predicting is more of the need, therefore, to demonstrate adaptability, judgment, these sorts of things that sit more in the domain of the kind of the crystallized intelligence that we build up over time.
And there is this strange belief that, or this narrative that, especially in technology, older people cannot pull it out.
Mm.
And I have a personal story. Like 1.5 years ago, a bunch of people my age, I'm 53, and even older, we put together and we started like getting passionate about vibe coding. So just with the eye, we code. What the hell? As soon as the guys put their fingers in the keyboard, the passion reignited. It's like they could do magic. So they spent so many nights and hours just constructed many things because you get this story about judgment. You mention it. And the ideas that we had in the past, suddenly we can realize it. So a lot of the things that we observe in older people, like lacking confidence, a little bit of less self-esteem, or not feeling capable of learning new stuff, it disappears when they find something that makes sense and has purpose. This little vibe coding club, let's call it, because it's a bunch of friends, and they end up drinking and all the stuff at the end. But anyways, it's just putting ourselves together to do something meaningful. And it's creative. And all of the things that you see in younger people, you see it in these old foxes.
Mhm.
Incredible, right? So, Lucy, how much of these biases is based on actual evidence that older workers are resistant to change, or they're slow to adapt, or not digitally savvy? Is there some data to prove either that they are not made for that, or there is a stereotype?
There's certainly data to show there's stereotypes, without a doubt. And I do believe that most stereotypes come from, a position of reality in some cases. Scandinavian people are stereotyped as being taller. On the whole, they generally are. Asian people are stereotyped as being shorter. Well, on the whole, they generally are. You'll always find exceptions to the rules, but on the whole, you do find that. Now, because we've got a slightly ageist, or not just a slightly, because we have an ageist society, without a doubt, it is the case that humans adapt to the context around them. So when you have a system, as you say, that kind of beats you down a little bit, it's easy to observe people then reacting to that stereotype. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If somebody says, even if they never say it, because it's very rare is it overt, but let's just say every year, every time, people get selected for projects, other people get promoted, other people get special attention, other people get the coaching and whatever else. The message that you're giving someone time and time again, whether it's overt or not, is we're not really interested in you. So if you hear that message all the time, what does that start to generate inside you? Well, they're not interested in me. I guess if they're not interested in me, there's no point me making the effort. So if you don't make the effort, you stop putting your hand up, you stop volunteering, I'm not going to be recognized for it anyway, so what's the point? So now what do people observe, right? They observe someone who never puts their hand up, who stops trying to make an effort, who stops speaking up. And so now that stereotype is now it's a fulfilled prophecy. So I would say that the stereotype starts with an ageist system, but The only way to break a stereotype is to recognize it's happening and then to go, okay, well, I'm going to step outside of this. So I would always maintain it's a lot easier for someone to change themselves than it is to try and change the rest of society around them. And if they do that, I mean, I can't work with anyone. If I'm saying to them, look, your life's over, accept it. The world is ageist. There is nothing you can do. That's a really damning message. But if I say to them, you know what, the world is ageist, we get it. And actually, when you were talking about your vibe coding, I'd put 50% of that passion and energy, I would put down not to the vibe coding itself. I would put it down to meeting up with a group of buddies every couple of weeks, having a drink together. Let me see your app. Oh my God, that's brilliant. Look what you did. Now I feel great because someone's acknowledged my work. So, when you're in a situation where you're surrounded by other people who get it, and that's part of the solution, but then understanding you've still got some agency. Yeah, things can be bad, but actually if I help other people, if I look at what I can do rather than what I can't, that's going to be a more empowering and a more inspirational place to end up. So we don't pretend that the world isn't bad. We don't pretend that things aren't harder for you when you get older. They are. There is still a lot you can do within that.
This is very inspirational, and it made me think not even about my friends who are 50 plus, but to the two daughters that I'm raising. One who is 18, the other one who is 15. The one who is 15, she lives in the world of males. Ice hockey. She's an ice hockey player.
Amazing.
And I can tell you, it is incredible what is going on. Even though in Switzerland they're throwing money to develop it, to explain to a boy of the same age, 15, why there is this gap between women and men. And I tell him how much opportunities you have got to go to championships that are fully paid by the club because you are in the masculine team. While Lena, my daughter, has less opportunities because, and on top, sometimes she has to put the money in order to go play against other countries. So the system has been built in such a way that the opportunities to practice what you aim for are more difficult for a cohort, in this case, women. Similarly, as you mentioned, context matters. The beliefs that we transmit matters. And older people at one moment starts to believe in the system. And it is difficult to break the system.
Yeah.
Unless, as you made me think in your book, is that we have the capacity to understand how the system works and practice how you can stand against the system.
Yeah, I agree. And it's there is still a huge amount that people can do outside of a system, without a doubt.
Exactly. But it takes courage and sometimes a little bit of work inside to recalibrate how to get rid of all this noise of shitty comments behind these jokes cracked behind your back so that you can recompose yourself, understand yourself, and do the action. How much of this ageism is actually rooted in a refusal to acknowledge different ways of engaging and collaborating? So, how much is it because we don't know? Like younger generations do not know how to talk to a 50 plus. They're using their language instead of adapting the language of the 50 plus so that there is an understanding and value created because the message is received, understood, and innovation can be created.
I mean, I don't think there's a big gap between the ages. I think there is certainly different behaviors, but I, I, I don't see teenagers not being able to have a good conversation with somebody in their 50s. I see systemically those opportunities don't arise that much, but I don't talk to me more because I'm not sure I recognize the issue you're describing.
I will let you. Yeah, there's some story that happened with my one of my daughters. So there is engagement with certain older people, my age and more, and in average, they get bored. easily because of the pace of telling stories, the use of stories to represent, to explain something to a 15 years old or 18 years old, and suddenly the interest breaks. So the big question that I had is it the way of the 50 years old that doesn't resonate with younger generation and gives a little bit more of fuel to the fire, where yeah, he looks a little bit too slow,
I
or
mean,
he's
I think
always telling stories.
what you're describing actually sounds a lot more to do with the real deficit that we're seeing now in younger children because of things like the harms of social media. I mean, I think the real issue, so you've got really, really strong evidence and data now that really does show that social media has hijacked our ability to attend to information to such an extent. I mean, there was this whole MIT study looking at kind of brain rot, which was published because it was felt that what was being observed was so damaging that actually this needed to be picked up much more kind of aggressively. And I think that inability to attend, because everything's so short, everything's so quick, sharp, reels, YouTube, shorts, Instagrams, whatever, that now is going to get hijacked again by AI. So, the social media is stopping young people from being able to really spend a long period of time attending to something. But AI is now undermining our ability to get attached to something. I mean, if you think about it, younger people always used to have their parents or their friends. Well, now their best friend could well be an AI chatbot that's going to tell them exactly what they want to hear, that's going to glaze them. It's going to say, what a brilliant question. Let me help you out of any scenario. So now instead of talking to my parents or talking to my friends, I'm going to talk to a machine. And that's going to have devastating consequences for human relationships.
That's a longer discussion. I understand the word devastating, but things become natural. Like I spend approximately 1 or 2 hours having a dialogue with, I don't know, Claude, let's say, just to make publicity to Claude. And it becomes natural and it makes me feel good. It doesn't mean that I'm not discussing with my wife. Otherwise, she will slap me in the face if I don't interact with her during the day.
Yes, but Ivan, you're in your 50s and your brain stops its real kind of development probably at around 25. So now you take a brain that's much more vulnerable to influence and hijacking and development and new neural pathways and things like that. I think it's an apple and a pear. It's a slightly different brain that you're dealing with now.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. You write in your book about the invisibility paradox, this idea that as workers age, their experience and expertise becomes very valuable and more invisible to the organization. What the hell?
And what the hell?
Why? Yes. Why is that paradox so pervasive? And what does it cost companies that fail to see it?
I mean, it's really pervasive just because we're so actually, we're kind of lazy. We always do what's always been done. And sadly, I'd love to be able to say to you, there's hundreds of organizations that are taking a massive leadership position on this, and some are, right? But it's few and it's far between. Very often what tends to get done is what's been done in the past. So the reason we are at this situation now, I mean, let's just take one tiny example, which is retirement age. Okay, retirement age was introduced broadly, certainly in the UK, but it's not a million miles away. I mean, other European countries. But in the UK anyway, it was introduced 1948. Retirement age at that point was 65 and life expectancy was 66. Okay, so you were expected to live for 1 year and then that's it. But that hasn't shifted. So you move 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, life expectancy creeps up, but retirement age didn't really change. We're now at the point where it's going to rise to 67, but too late, right? Life expectancy now is, in its 80s. So it's just been stuck with where it was introduced, and it didn't evolve and it didn't change. Look at recruitment. We've got a scenario where most jobs will say, well, the way that we recruit people is we produce a job description, even though that doesn't really inform people as to whether or not they like it. And then the
No.
first stage, send us a CV, or we look at a LinkedIn, even though it doesn't predict anything, still gets used. This information is in the public domain. We've known about it since 2019. There was a study done, meta-analysis, right? 80 different studies put in, 0.06 correlation of a CV predicting future job performance. In other words, it's like random, doesn't work. There are other things people could do that would be much more effective in the public domain, and nothing changes. So what do you put that down to? It's really comforting. If you're the person that comes in and does something that's radically different but right, or it's the right idea, but maybe it takes a bit of experimenting, right? Maybe the initial reaction, because people are like, oh, I don't really like change. So maybe the initial reactions aren't always great, and maybe it takes a bit of time to sort of wearing that responsibility takes bravery and it takes leadership. And if we're being completely honest, it's just a heck of a lot easier, and it's not someone's pay grade. If someone comes to you and says, right, your job is to transform recruitment, I never want to see a CV come in as the first point of selection ever again, you'll change it because you've got a mandate. But without that, who sticks their head above a parapet? Like, it may not work, it may not be broken, but everyone else is doing it. So that's okay. I mean, look at COVID. It was ridiculous, all the lockdowns, ridiculous to make people wear face masks that didn't work, ridiculous to stop children going from school when they were never going to be. But because everyone else is doing it, let's follow, let's follow. We don't want to be the people, because if something goes wrong, it'd be because you didn't follow. Whereas if you follow and it goes wrong, you're okay because everyone else is doing it.
There is a couple of, in fact, there is two things that strikes me of what you say. First, the act of bravery. We live in a society where we live with fears, and the schooling, education, work has is made to have a structure so that you don't bend away from the rules that you have to follow. It is very difficult for humans because there is the big stake is that you don't get paid, or may get fired if something blows because you took the wrong decision. So the right decision is always, as you said, do whatever was done in the past, which is good for strategy consulting firms. They know them. It's a logo. So they will never try something else at the big strategy consulting firms. Or they will never get away from the formalized hiring processes that they have, or how people gets promotion. Or how do you build a system that will never change towards the perception of the association that you are 50 plus, so you don't know AI. You don't know how to use AI. And that's one of the things that a lot of people are saying in corporation, associating age with bloody AI, when it's a lot of the younger generations have some problems with AI. I have some people working with me from university, and I can tell you that they don't know how to prompt the bloody AI correctly. And my 63 years old friend, he knows the shit out of all the prompts possible. Anyways, so despite the fact that there is a lot of information proving that something is right, things are not happening in the reality, so it becomes crap. Like for you, in you were mentioning the age of retirement. Yes, I have seen some of the studies that shows. I have seen the examples of Japan where people have the choice, because that is very human. They have the choice. You want to leave? Leave. If you don't want to leave, you have the possibility to continue. My mother-in-law, she is 77, and she's still working in Japan. She is still working part-time, but she's still working. And something related to her original job. This is good. She's in excellent shape.
Yeah, that's very good. No one should fully retire. I mean, the evidence on that's pretty strong. If people feel that they have a sense of purpose,
Mm.
then you're going to have better life satisfaction, better cognitive health, better physical health. And, I define work quite broadly. It's something that you do in the service of other people. Doesn't have to be paid, doesn't have to be a full-time job, but spending hours and hours at leisure all day, every day is not what human beings were evolved for. So, the pleasure in part of our existence is equivalent to the suffering and the hardship that we experience. You can't feel achievement, you can't feel pride without making the effort to get there. So stepping off entirely. I mean, we've all heard the stories, haven't we? We've all heard the stories of someone who retires and they drop down dead 5 weeks later, or the
Indeed.
people who live for an event, like they wait for Christmas and then they die, or their daughter's wedding and then they die. When you've got something to live for, you live for it. And divorcing age from purpose just because you've hit 65 seems, well, it just seems societally anyway, it seems quite stupid, really. If you think about it, there's still lots of countries in the world that have no concept of retirement. You just carry on going, you carry on with your, I don't know, your farm, your village, who knows what. But sorry, that's probably really ignorant examples. But I mean, yeah, there's still a lot of places where you don't get to retire.
Mm, I believe that the but that's my personal opinion, and I would love to hear your opinion too about that. It is a matter of choice. Is we cannot make it a rule. This is the age. No, this is you have the options to do it. Not like now. You finish in Switzerland. By the way, if you work after your retirement, you pay more taxes. So why the hell would I do it? I mean, it's not because I'm older that I'm stupid. So I will not work. Then even though I want to be useful, I want to pass on my knowledge.
Volunteer.
Huh.
I mean, it is interesting how societies can kind of incentivize behavior, and it does, it works. But, I think there's inherent value in work, and we shouldn't. And it's interesting because actually, if you ask people as they get older how important money is to them, it becomes less and less and less important. Obviously, for people living on a breadline, it's going to be more important. Context is everything. But generally, out of 7 different factors, money drops right down to 6th on the list. So it's not the biggest. It was never a motivator anyway. Hygiene factor, but not a motivator.
Brave Starts, you are working with over 50 plus in age of entrepreneurs, employees who are
Or
often
any age, actually. We don't. I
any
mean,
age.
yeah, we're not.
Okay.
I mean, because there's actually ageist to age discriminate, right? So we don't say you have to be a certain age, but generally, because the world is a bit ageist, the people who come to us tend to be people experiencing that problem. So yeah, we get anyone typically over the age of 40. So 40, 50, 60. We don't have many people in their 70s, probably a couple, but not many.
So what I wanted to understand is what are the challenges that they come with and how do you solve them? Because sometimes in as humans, and that I explain also to my daughters that even if I am an adult, sometimes I don't know what to do. And I'm not going to play the role of somebody who knows the absolute truth because I am older than her. I have doubts and I tell her that I have doubts. So at the age of 50, sometimes we have clarity about maybe something that we would love to do, but we don't have clarity about how to break the chains that are attaching us. This fear of financial independence, of a fear of not being capable of, or that you need, I don't know, to a coder or money to launch your business. And at the end, when you jump, you realize it wasn't like that really. I just needed to perceive it in another way. So what would be for you the challenges and the way how you help them transform and navigate these career transitions?
Uh, the challenges are pretty clear and easy to define actually, because we ask people all the time, and we've now had more than 6,000 people tell us. So what, right out in front, about 70, they're allowed to choose more than one item, right? So they can choose up to 3, but by far and away, the one that gets chosen the most is, the biggest problem is, I have no idea what it is I actually want to do next. So I agree with you. If they have clarity, they don't need me. So they come to me when they're like, I know I want to carry on working. I want to feel purpose. I don't know what that is. All I know is that maybe I'm bored. So I don't really like what I'm doing anymore. Or maybe I'm just worried that in the next couple of years, what I'm doing now isn't going to be sustainable, or I'm getting divorced. I've got to go back to the world of work. So as I say, the biggest problem for most people is that they just don't actually know where it is they want to spend their time and energy. So that's number one. And then number two is pretty close behind, and that's ageism. So they've got clarity, they know what they want to do, they can't get through the freaking door. So closed time and time and time again. And then the third item on the list is they want flexible work. So they have, this is a hygiene thing. You know, they have it could be someone they're caring for. It could be that they just don't want to work 5 days a week anymore because maybe money is not the most important issue. So when they're looking for something that's a little bit more flexible, it's very difficult for them to find it. So again, those, once you've got those three problems, everything else, there will be some, but it's clear daylight. Those are the three standout problems very clearly.
Do you have like a an approach or a systemic way to help them in step by step, or is it more about like coaching? Like we discuss one to one and we try to figure out together.
Yeah, we definitely do not do one-on-one. So
Hmm.
yeah, I guess the steps that we would take is number one, an acceptance that you will learn better and you'll be more inspired and you'll go further faster if you're working with other people. Because often the secret that holds people back is like your vibe coding group, right? The thing that keeps people engaged, the thing that inspires, the thing that gives people a sense of purpose is actually they want to help their buddy out that they've just made in the last couple of weeks. Or I've spoken to Ivan and I know he was going to do this, this, and this over the next 2 weeks. I want to go back and I want to hear how Ivan's getting on. But also, I told everyone else that I'm going to focus on X, Y, and Z. And now I've got to tell them how I'm getting on. So it's the sense of community is building block number one that we give them in terms of how we structure things. Number two, we do give people a process. So there's a lot of misguided expectations, and there's a lot of the problem with coaching is there's this inherent belief that people have the answers within themselves. No, they don't. All right? They don't. They think they want to be a hotel owner. Do they? Go and do it for 2 days. Now tell me what you think. All right? And then they come back and they're like, shit, I don't want to run a hotel. I really don't want to run a hotel. Or I want to be a yoga part-time, or I want to be a life coach. Yeah, talk to one. Just go and talk to one. So the process, the structure we take people through is, you're not gonna make any moves until you've spoken to people, you've done some work experience, you understand how that business is going to work, you've had a few conversations, you know where you're going to set up, you've got your business plan. I mean, that's pretty much most of it. So it's experimentation, it's action, because it's through those activities that you actually have the space now to reflect. If you think about any situation where you've actually learned how you feel or respond to something, it's not because you've sat in a room and thought about it. If I gave you a rambutan to eat and say, hey, are you going to like the flavor of that? You can't think about it and answer the question. All right. You don't learn to ride a bike because you read a book about it. You get on that bike, you fall over, you understand how to move your weight. And it's the same with humans, right? When you start in a job, you might actually not like it that much, but over time, you build relationships, people are depending on you, you've shaped a project, all of that sort of stuff. So by the time you get 9 months down the line, actually you quite enjoy your job now. But it's like where it starts is not where it finishes. So people need educating on, God, all sorts of things. I mean, number one, the job. Number two, how they're going to get it, because things are ageist. So guess what? Applying for lots of jobs isn't going to get you anywhere. How do we build a strategy to get you outside of that? Well, then that's a whole other workshop. So, I mean, it's a series of workshops that we take people through, and every single one is designed to address different problems at different stages that people will have.
Lucy, I love it. You have mentioned something that is very dear to my heart, and unfortunately, I learned very late in my life that instead of having intentions, goals in my life, and that I need to know how is it going to look at the end of my life, to go into iterations, into this agile approach. Go experiment, get some data, and change it, ditch it, or keep on doing it. I love that. And that's how, since I left my corporate life, I try to live my day-to-day life. I don't know what I don't know until I do this first step.
You should pay to become a member. It's 89 quid.
I will go to the UK to
Right.
I was
You
there
don't have
1 month
to.
ago.
It's all online.
Oh, that's a great idea. Tell me, Lucy, how can people reach you out to understand more about the process, to be to attend some of the classes?
Mm.
What is the best way, the easiest way to reach you out, Lucy?
Well, obviously we have a website, so it's bravestarts.com. I would obviously like it if people buy the book because actually, so we cover an awful lot through the workshops that we take people through. There is a lot of evidence, rationale behind what it is that we teach and why we teach it. And that's all in the book. So the book is Age Against the Machine. You can get that on Amazon. But actually, you can also find me on LinkedIn. There are not that many other people called Lucy Standing. And there are not that many other people called Lucy Standing, based in London, running a business called Brave Starts. So definitely find me.
That is true, but I'm going to be putting all of these links, a link to the Brave Starts website, the link to the book, because I think that when you don't know if you want or not, it's always good to get the less there is less friction, to have the book, see if the methodology fits you, and then go ahead. And I will put also your LinkedIn profile, Lucy. Thank you very much for the time. Really lovely to speak to you.
Lovely to talk to you too, Ivan.
Thank you.